Stop me if you heard this before, but Raiders rookie tight end Brock Bowers, yeah, he's really good at football. The national recognition that he continues to receive is further evidence of that. That plus more on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for December 3rd, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you, whether you're finding us wherever you get your favorite podcasts or if you're checking us out on YouTube. Either way, we appreciate that. The show continues to grow each and every day, even in a bad season, and that's because of you, Raider Nation, and if you're checking us out on YouTube, because of the job that my man Ari does behind the scenes. He does fantastic work, making sure we're on YouTube each and every day. We appreciate him. We shout him out. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. I'm on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254, and we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. If you want to be a part of the show, get your calls or your text in. It is all good. As a matter of fact, we'll close out the show with plenty of feedback from the result of Friday's game, the loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, the coaching staff, the team moving forward, players, just everything going on, silver and black related. We got your calls and texts. That'll close out the show. Segment number 2, we'll take a look at the current draft order as of Monday night for the league, the top 5 who are going to be picking right now, and kind of how the league comes up with it. There's been a lot of confusion. There's a lot of misinformation out there about how the league determines the draft order. So, of course, I went to NFL Communications. I got the exact rules. We'll talk about it. We'll break it down. There's a bunch of different scenarios that could take place. Obviously, the easiest case is you have the worst record, you get the first pick. And that is true. But there's a lot of different scenarios and factors that go into it if it's not just that easy, that cut and dry. We'll talk about it in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, just going to give a lot of love to Brock Bowers because, well, he's earned that love his rookie year. We'll do that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. And it's never too late to jump into America's #1 sportsbook, which is FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. I'll tell you more about them later on in the show, but let's go ahead and jump right into it. When it comes to Raiders rookie Brock Bowers, he's continuing to make headlines. He's continuing to wow folks, and I think that even the ones like, all of us that knew he was a really good player didn't know how good he was going to be, especially his rookie year. It's not an easy transition into the National Football League, but I'll tell you what, Brock Bowers has made it look pretty easy. And that only gets me excited for the future of what the Raiders have in that dude. So every Sunday, NFL Communications sends out a 7 for Sunday and 7 for 7, or they'll send out some of the big time performances. And then even if you don't make the top 7, they'll say, oh, and other big notable, players and what they were able to do over the course of the weekend. And so they did that for week 13, and Brock Bowers came on the list. Again, not the first time he's been on the list this year, but they sent out the message talking about Brock Bowers had 10 catches for 140 yards and a touchdown in week 13. He has 84 catches this season, surpassed Keith Jackson, who had 81 in 1988 with Philadelphia, for the second most receptions by a rookie tight end in NFL history. That's right, history. Only Sam Laporta with 86 in 2023 with Detroit has more. Think about this. Bowers is already at 84. Sam Laporta had 86. Bowers still has a handful of games, so he's not only going to beat that 86, he's going to probably blow it out of the water, right? I look at Brock Bowers, as long as he stays healthy, and knock on wood, because the Raiders have dealt with so much injuries this season, he's going to be well over 100 catches. I mean, this dude is incredible. He's had 3 games with at least 10 catches in 2024, joined Odell Beckham Jr., who did it 4 times in 2014, and Jalen Waddle 3 times in 2021, as the only rookies all time with 10 or more receptions in 3 games. Yeah, that's what Brock Bowers is doing. And oh, by the way, he's doing it with a cast of characters of guys throwing on the ball, right? Gardner Minshew, then Aiden O'Connell, then Gardner Minshew, then Aiden O'Connell, sprinkle in a little Desmond Ridder at the same time. Like, he has not had any kind of consistency when it comes to the quarterback position, but all he does is make plays. All he does is catch the ball and pick up yardage. 84 catches on the season, well over 800 yards and 4 TDs on the season, his rookie year. And again, with a cast of characters of guys throwing him the rock. So on Monday, it came out about Pro Bowl voting. And of course, right now, a lot of Pro Bowl voting is going on and teams are campaigning for their players. Well, this came out again from the NFL. It says, according to the NFL, Raiders rookie Brock Bowers is number 1 in the AFC and second behind George Kittle in Pro Bowl voting at tight end. Think about that. Number 1 in the AFC and second in the league, only behind George Kittle, who's obviously a really good tight end. But what stood out to me about this, and it wasn't even my original idea, my guy Ryan Hogue, who was a former Raiders wide receiver, he was drafted Mr. Irrelevant back in 2003. He joins my radio show every Monday and Friday. We do a segment called Nothing's Irrelevant. He brought up the fact when I told him about Brock Bowers being, so highly voted on as a Pro Bowler at the tight end position. He said, yeah, think about this, Q. In the AFC, there's another tight end who's really stinking good named Travis Kelce that not only is going to get a lot of votes from Chiefs fans who are, picking Travis Kelce, but also he's got the Swifties on his side too with everything that he's got going on with Taylor Swift. And it's like, dang, I would never even have brought Taylor Swift to the conversation because that's just something I don't talk about that. I have no need. But to his point, like he has all these folks that are newfound football fans that are supporting him because of her. And Brock Bowers is still number 1 right now. That's wild to me. So just, again, tip of the cap to what he's been able to do so far his rookie year. As far as other Raiders go, Max Crosby is currently 6th amongst defensive ends. Robert Spillane is 5th amongst linebackers. And Daniel Carlson is 10th amongst kickers. So that kind of rounds it up when it comes to Raiders in the Pro Bowl. But, man, tip of the cap to Brock Bowers and what he's done his rookie year so far. And that also leads me to another nugget. I went down this rabbit hole over the weekend on Twitter, which shame on me. I know better than that. But I lost about 30 to 45 minutes of my life that I'll never get back because I was conversating about Tom Telesco and what he's done in year 1 with the silver and black. And the funny thing about it, I think what really blew my mind and what made me go down this rabbit hole, I didn't think there was a conversation. I didn't think that there was an argument about what Tom Telesco has done. I thought we were all in agreement that, hey, so far so good in year 1 for Tom T. Right? All he did in the draft is go get Brock Bowers, Jackson Powers-Johnson, and DJ Glaze with the first 3 picks. Those are all 3 starters with Brock Bowers being a star. Then DeCam Richardson with pick number 4, number 112 overall. He's getting a lot of burn. Tommy Eichenberg, he's really a special teams guy, but he looks like he can end up being a pretty good linebacker. Only time will tell with him, of course. Dylan Lobby, I know he hasn't done a whole lot yet this season, but the Raiders clearly like him. You saw what he was able to do in the special teams game. Hasn't really got on the field offensively, but he's there. Trey Taylor, the safety out of Air Force, he was on IR for a while. He's really a special teams guy. And then MJ Devonshire, the cornerback out of Pittsburgh, ultimately got waived. But just the draft class alone, having 3 starters out of the first 3 picks, like Raider Nation, I've been a Raider fan for a very long time. I've obviously been covering the Raiders from a media standpoint for a long time as well, but a fan first and foremost. When's the last time we could sit there and say comfortably, oh, yeah, man, the Raiders got 3 starters with their first 3 picks? And I know right now you're probably saying, oh, well, Q, 2019, the Raiders drafted 3 first-round picks in Cleve Farrell, Josh Jacobs, and Jonathan Abram. Yeah, sure, true. They did, and they were starters, there's no doubt, but they were starters because of their draft spot, not necessarily because they were starters, right? They started games, sure. They weren't necessarily real-deal quality starters. Josh Jacobs was. Cleve Farrell, times was. Jonathan Abram, I think that was a pretty big whiff, right? And then even the next year, when they had 2 first-round picks, they went and got, Henry Ruggs with the first-round pick. Yeah, he was a starter. And then Damon Arnett with their second pick in the first round. And we all know how that went, right? He was a starter because he had to be, but not because he necessarily was. Like, I feel very confident that the Raiders and Tom Telesco are in a great position with Brock Bowers, JPJ, Jackson Powers-Johnson, and DJ Glaze. Like, I'm very comfortable those guys can be foundational pieces for the Raiders for years to come. And obviously Brock Bowers is an absolute superstar. And then a lot of people were arguing, well, he didn't really do anything in free agency. That's good, right? That was something that we applauded when free agency opened up. Like, he went out and made the big move for Christian Wilkins, obviously because of injury that hasn't worked out this year. But we all got excited. Every single person got excited about the Christian Wilkins signing because he was going to make Max Crosby that much better and the rest of the defensive line that much better. So he goes out and makes that move, goes out and signs Gardner Minshew for what I thought was going to be insurance. Ultimately, he ended up starting. That's a whole nother conversation. Goes out and signs Alexander Mattison, who outside of Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers really was the offensive MVP. Right now, I mean, Sincere McCormick is running really strong downhill, but Alexander Mattison was the best running back up until lately. And he's injured right now, so who knows if he's going to come back or not, but he was a good pickup. Charles Snowden was the guy that they had on the practice squad. He's obviously getting a ton of playing time. And how about K'Lavon Chaisson, the former first-round pick who was waived by the Jaguars, and Tom Telesco picked him up off waivers, and he's producing. I mean, just go back and look at what he did against Kansas City. Again, this is another former first-round pick that's getting after the quarterback. So now, look, is there work that still needs to be done? Absolutely. I said it on my radio show, like, look, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? I mean, you're not going to be able to solve all the problems. Did he get the franchise quarterback? No. Does he need to do that? Sure. Right? Is there probably a big-time running back that they need to get? Yeah, sure. He didn't bring back Josh Jacobs. I get it. But they thought that they had something in Zamir White based off what we saw from him the last 4 games of the season. Thought, okay, he's got something right there. And you bring in Alexander Madison, all of a sudden that position, you lower the value of it. And okay, then you still have your production. Obviously, that didn't happen. So that could be, we can even talk about that being a miss. But for the most part, Tom Telesco's done a really good job as far as I'm concerned his first year. Again, a lot more work to do. I'm not going to sit here and sing his praises and say he's the end-all, be-all. But the one thing I know about Tom T is that he did gather a lot of talent there in L.A. with the Chargers or even San Diego before that. Now, what they were able to do with it afterwards because of not having the right coach in place, well, that's a them thing. And, hell, that might end up being a Raider thing too. Right? They might ultimately get to the end of the season and say, yeah, we did some really good things with these players, but the coaching wasn't proper. So now we got to go out and find the right coach. Again, that's a them thing. That's a front office and an ownership thing. That's not a Q Myers thing, right? But, again, it was so funny. I kept going down this rabbit hole. I'm like, are we really complaining about what Tom Telesco's done his first year when there was so many? I mean, we can go back and just do the Raiders draft history. You just do it. Do yourself a favor. Do something good for your country is what I like to say. Go back and look at the Raiders draft history and go and look at all those names on there, and you tell me who are hits and who aren't, right? I feel confident in the direction that Tom Telesco has his team going, especially with the draft. If you can build your team through the draft and then sign a free agent here, sign a free agent there to fill some holes, that's how you build teams. A lot of teams go out and try to spend a lot of money in free agency and think that that's how they're going to build their team, and it doesn't necessarily work out that way. So the best case scenario is to do it through the draft. Tom T is going to obviously need a few drafts to build up the depth because, look, we saw what happened. All these guys have been injured this year, and they don't have the quality depth behind them. But they have a lot of guys out there playing hard, and a lot of young dudes are getting some burn early on. So they went from being, last year, the 6th oldest team to being one of the youngest teams this year. So a lot of these guys are getting some necessary reps right now, and that's going to pay off in the future. Coming up in segment number 2, speaking of the future, how does the draft order, how does it come together? How does the NFL put it together? Well, I got a good explanation of it. I'll get you updated to what it is as of Monday night, and we'll go from there. We'll talk all things NFL draft as far as the order, not necessarily what the Raiders or anybody else is going to do, but we'll talk about that in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about our good friends at PrizePicks. And PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions with a B of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You know their slogan, run your game all season long on PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including Cali, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform with the injury insurance policy. So your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks keeps your lineup alive. And right now they offer Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. So right now, sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. And if you look at the calendar, today's Tuesday. Yeah, Taco Tuesday. PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineup. So right now, download the app, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Again, PrizePicks, run your game. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Wanted to get into some Raiders draft conversation as far as draft order, where they stand as of Monday night, and a couple other little nuggets about 2025 when it comes to the silver and black. And these are a couple nuggets that Josh DeBow from the AP, I know he's a villain around Raider Nation, but he put out a couple of these little nuggets, and I thought that they were interesting. After the loss to the Chiefs on Friday, the Raiders will officially miss the playoffs for the 20th time in the last 22 seasons. They are the only team with 0 playoff wins and 0 division titles in that span. Think of that. 20 out of 22 seasons. So that's rough. So whenever Raider Nation is told to be patient, all you got to do is point at that stat and say, yeah, I've been patient long enough. right? Again, I say it all the time, right? We have kids that have not seen the Raiders as a successful team, right? They keep on saying, well, Dad, when are they going to be good like you said they are? Oh, it's coming this year, son. This will be the year, or whatever the case may be, right? I mean, anytime that someone says, well, you just got to be patient, you can look back at that stat right there. Missed the playoffs for the 20th time in the last 22 seasons. Only team with 0 playoff wins and 0 division titles in that span. Now, this is kind of a good note for their schedule coming up in 2025. They have clinched a last place schedule. So that means games versus last place teams in the AFC North, AFC East, and NFC North. And the reason I bring that up, because a lot of people talk about the turnaround that the Houston Texans had their rookie year with C.J. Stroud. It's like, man, he went from being a guy that they didn't necessarily even want to all of a sudden Houston being really good, and they won their division, and they even won a playoff game, which they did, and I got to give him credit for that. But one of the things that John McClain points out to me all the time is, they were also playing a last-place schedule because they were such a bad team for multiple years that they ended up playing a last-place schedule. So that makes it a little bit easier. So a lot of folks always talk about the Raiders' schedule is always so hard. The schedulers don't do them any favors, this, that, and the other. The Raiders already set to have a last-place schedule. That's who they're going to be facing in 2025. So, again, they got games versus last-place teams in the AFC North, AFC East, and NFC North. That'll happen in 2025. Now, that doesn't mean that the games are going to be easy, right? Because these teams are in the last place for one reason or the other. It could just be because, right, they were riddled with injuries like the Raiders, or they really are a really bad team, or whatever the case may be. There's always different scenarios, and we know that there's always like a worst to first team. But, again, just kind of looking at it from face value, that's where they're set, and that's what their schedule is set to look like in 2025. So currently, as of Monday night, the draft order, the top 5 go Jags number 1, Raiders number 2, Giants number 3, Pats number 4, and the Panthers number 5. Now, I always go to tankathon.com/NFL to take a look at it. Tom Telesco from the NFL Network actually sent out a updated list of the top 10 probably like a week ago or so, and was saying that this is the actual NFL order, and so it's a little bit different. But so I want to deep dive into why it was different and how the different scenarios come about. So this is how the draft is actually set. And right now, the Jaguars, the Raiders, Giants, they all have the same overall record at 2-10 overall, but the Raiders are in the second spot. So this is, according, again, straight from the NFL. The order of selection is determined by the reverse order of finish in the previous season. Barring any trades between the clubs, each round starts with the team that finished with the worst record and ends up with the Super Bowl champs. So it's real simple. If the Jaguars have the worst overall record, if they end up 2-15, they'll pick first. If the Raiders are 3-14, they'll pick second. You get that. That's the easiest, right? And that's how you wish that it plays out. But it's not guaranteed. So teams that didn't qualify for the playoffs are assigned draft slots 1 through 20. Obviously, the Raiders will be part of that. Now, this is where it gets tricky. In situations where teams finished the previous season with identical records, the determination of draft position is decided by strength of schedule, the aggregate winning percentage of a team's opponents. The team that played the schedule with the lowest winning percentage will be awarded the higher pick. If the teams have the same strength of schedule, division, or conference tiebreakers are applied. If the divisional or conference tiebreakers are not applicable, or ties still exist between teams of different conferences, ties will be broken by the following tiebreaker method. All right, so there's a lot of them. Head-to-head if applicable, right? That's the easiest. 2, best won-loss tied percentage in common games, a minimum of 4. 3, strength of victory in all games. Again, strength of victory in all games. 4, best combined ranking among all teams in points scored and points allowed in all games. 5, best net points in all games. 6, best net touchdowns in all games. And 7, a coin toss. And if you remember, I don't exactly remember what year it is, but it was the year, I can't remember who it was that the Raiders ended up drafting. But remember I think it was Colton Miller, right? It was when Colton Miller was drafted, when the Niners and the Raiders actually had to flip picks or flip a coin for the number 9 overall, and I believe the 49ers won it, and the Raiders were picking number 10. They obviously, in that draft, that was the one where it was in Arlington. They traded back a few times, but sometimes a coin toss will come into factor. So there's so many different elements that go into play into this. So it's just something to know in the back of your head. It's not just as cut and dry as, well, if this team loses, okay, they're going to be the number 1 overall pick or the number 2 overall pick. Now, again, if that just plays out that way when it comes to the overall records, there's one team that has just the worst record. Cool, that's easy. They got the number 1 overall pick. But one in the case of ties, and there's very easily could be some ties, as there are currently multiple ties, then all these different elements go into factors. So, we've had calls, we've had conversations about, math, this math product, that math. That's a lot of different scenarios that play a role in that math. Again, if the teams have the same strength of schedule, division or conference tiebreakers are applied. If the divisional or conference tiebreakers are not applicable, or ties still exist between teams of different conferences, ties will be broken by the following tie-breaking method, and there's 7 of them. Head-to-head if applicable. Best won-loss tied percentage in common games, minimum 4. Strength of victory in all games. Best combined ranking among all teams in points scored and points allowed in all games. Best net points in all games. Best net touchdowns in all games, and coin toss. So again, it's something that's going to be fluid. It's going to be fluid the rest of the season. Currently, right now, again, as of Monday night, the Raiders are picking at number 2, but it's going to be a fluid situation the rest of the way. It's not something that I'm going to dwell on every single day or every single week, but I'm definitely going to pay attention to it, look at it, and update it as need be, right, as we get closer and closer towards the end of the season. Obviously, every game is going to matter. If you look at the Raiders' schedule, they play the Jags down the stretch, so that's going to be a game that is going to probably go a long way in determining who's going to get the number 1 overall pick. Obviously, the Giants are in play as well. They're terrible. The Jaguars don't need a quarterback. The Giants, they need a quarterback. The Raiders, I think, need a quarterback. The Patriots don't need a quarterback, and the Panthers don't look now, but Bryce Young is playing really well. So they probably don't need a quarterback either. So, again, a lot of scenarios in play. And the other thing is, obviously, teams can trade as well. So, hey, if you don't get the number 1 spot, you can make a trade. Obviously, that's going to cost you draft capital for the future. But I just want to kind of get everybody updated on what it would take and how it all comes about, what the NFL is looking at as far as the draft order. It's not as simple as a lot of people think, where it's just, you took a loss. All right, that's just going to make you even better in that position. It's not necessarily that. But what's on your mind? Your calls and texts are going to close out the show. 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider Podcast voicemail line. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. And again, it's never too late to jump into FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. And if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can make that bet as well. I'm like, maybe you didn't trust what I was saying about Kansas City and the fact that they never cover the spread until you got to halftime. You're like, wait, hold on. Maybe he's onto something. 13.5 points is a lot. Maybe they're not going to cover this spread. All right, let me go on and open up my FanDuel Sportsbook app and go ahead and make a nice little bet, because I don't see this team going and covering that spread. Again, Kansas City very rarely covers the spread. If you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Go to FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off. Let's switch it up a little bit. We'll start off with a text from Dave in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Said, hey, Q, I wanted to run my thoughts on Max Crosby to get your take. I love Max and would never want to see him in another uniform. You can't beat his constant motor and unwavering commitment to the Raiders. However, I think he's fallen short in his strive for greatness. While he plays nonstop and often gets in the backfield, I feel like he lacks follow-through. It seems to me that when he sacks a quarterback, more often than not, he just wraps him up the quarterback and rarely takes him to the ground. Where are the strip sacks? Where are the hard hits on opposing quarterbacks? Where are the forced fumbles on quarterbacks and running backs? Am I wrong? Am I the only one who sees this? I recognize that Max is a force to be reckoned with, but I think there's a world of a difference between his game and someone like TJ Watt. That's Dave from Fredericksburg, Virginia, and thanks for the text. I appreciate you. And yeah, I mean, this is something I've actually talked about quite a bit. And it's always tough when you talk about Max Crosby, because people all of a sudden hear like, wait, hold on, you're criticizing him? But he plays so hard. He works so hard. He's so good. And you're absolutely right. And he's fantastic. He's obviously the leader of the defense. But there are those game-changing plays that don't happen and aren't happening with Max. And, you know, in his defense, he doesn't take the quarterback to the ground that often because he doesn't want to get called for a penalty. And you just never know what's going to happen when these quarterbacks get hit. These guys, all of a sudden, they throw a flag on you. So he's trying to be careful when it comes to that. But the strip sacks, absolutely something that I would like to see him work on and develop into his game, right? I'd like to see him do some like J.J. Watt was doing back in the day, knock the ball down, right? Even intercept a ball or two, whatever the case may be, right? Just game-changing plays. T.J. Watt makes a lot of them. I pointed that out a few weeks ago when the Raiders took on the Steelers, and T.J. didn't get any quarterback sacks, but he was able to force a couple fumbles. He's fantastic at that. I'd like to see Max take his game to that level as well. And look, he's the one who wants to be legendary. He says it all the time, right? I mean, he's like you said, strive for greatness, but that's how you take your game to the next level. So I don't think that Max would take that and say that that's unfair. I think that he wants to add that to his game as much as possible as well. But yeah, there's definitely a difference. There's different tiers. Again, Max Crosby is fantastic for everything that he does. Love his attitude and the way he brings it for the Raiders. Would like to see him do a little bit more. And that's all that is asking a great player to be even greater, right? So that's not an unfair criticism. And I think a lot of people have talked about that as well. Dave, thanks for that text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from OD Raider E. He's calling to say what he is in favor of with the Raiders the rest of the season. Here he is, OD Raider E.
Hey, what's going on, Q? It's OD Raider E from Orlando. I was just calling in, just listening to your show today and last week. I just want to chime in on the tank conversation. I watched the Kansas City game, awesome game, hard fought, and at the end, I know it's unpopular, but I'm Team Tank. And hear me out. If we go out and we just play hard and we win a couple more games and not get in the playoffs, of course, we'll be stuck towards the middle and then trying to leverage our whole future for a top round pick to get a quarterback. Whereas if we tank, we don't have to do any of that. We'll just get a pick and then we can build what we want to do, build our roster through the draft. I just want to hear your opinion on this, but for example, in 2023, Carolina Panthers picked 9 overall, and they had to trade 4 picks and DJ Moore to get number 1 draft Bryce Young. Whereas if we just tank, we might bust with the number 1 overall pick, but hey, we won't be leveraging our future. Let me hear your thoughts on this. It's OD Raider E. I love what you do every day. I love it. Listen to it. Only request I would have is maybe do a 2-part segment one time. I think I've heard you do I think last year. And I loved it. But yeah, OD Raider E signing out.
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And you know me, man. I'm not going to actively root for a loss, right? But I'll acknowledge what you said, right? If they lose, they'll be in a much better position to get what they need. Right? I'm always in the belief that the draft will work itself out, right? Wherever you end up with your draft pick, that's your starting point. Doesn't mean that that's your ending point. I always feel like that is going to work itself out. Now, like you said, if you have to trade up, you do have to give up some draft capital to make that move. But sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, right? And, again, looking at that game on Friday, it hurt. That was a tough one. I tweeted out that was a tough one as soon as they lost. I wanted to see the Raiders win that game like no other. Thought that they had a big opportunity to win it. Obviously, it didn't happen, but when it's all said and done, as much as they played hard, they put a lot of folks on notice. They didn't win the game, and, well, there's worse things that could have happened to them than, just lose the game, right? So, I mean, look, there's a case to be said that, as much as they put everyone on notice, they did okay because, well, I mean, losing obviously doesn't hurt their draft stock. But I'm not going to actively root for a loss. I'll be able to look at the big picture and say, okay, yeah, they lost the game. They competed their butts off. They're obviously still out there fighting for their coach. So, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, I'll say this. I don't know what their coach needs. I don't know what AP needs as far as wins to secure his job. I mean, this is something that he's got to do just like he had to do it last year. I mean, there was no way that he was going to be able to lose out all last year and still maintain the job. I don't know. I don't think that them going 2-15 is going to have AP back next year. I don't see it unless there's already been a conversation about, hey, don't worry about it. We're bringing you back next year. And I highly doubt that conversation's already happened. So he's got to show something from a coaching point of view. They've got to get some dubs under their belt to ensure that he's able to keep his job. And I don't even know if that ensures it, right? I would just say as just kind of a rule of thumb, like there's got to be a number that he's got to hit to ensure that he comes back. I just have no idea what that number is. Obviously, I'm not privy to that, and that conversation, I guess, just like the draft pick, will work itself out at some point. But thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Doc B in Iowa. Says, Q, Doc B from Iowa, did you see this list of highest paid coaches? Obviously, I didn't expect to see AP anywhere on the list, but the other 3 AFC West coaches are all in the top 5. I'm not using those facts as an argument for or against Coach Pierce, but it just reiterates how the Raiders have their work cut out for them amongst the best paid coaches in the league who, oh, by the way, as Q would say, always have top-level quarterbacks to coach. That's Doc B in Iowa. And the top 5 paid coaches in this article that he was talking about, actually the top 6, Andy Reid, $20 million annually, Sean Payton, $18 million annually, Steve Kerr, the Warriors, $17.5 million annually, Greg Popovich of the Spurs, $17 million, Mike Tomlin, $16 million, and Jim Harbaugh, $16 million as well. So, yeah, I mean, those guys all have skins on the wall, though. Right? I mean, to get that kind of money, you've got to have some trophies, right? And all those guys have trophies. Jim Harbaugh obviously has a national championship in college, but he also has a track record, a proof of concept that, you know, he's the guy that can win games. So, yeah, a guy like Antonio Pierce is definitely not going to be there. He's going to have to earn his way up there and win a lot of games before he'll have an opportunity to be up there with those guys. Those are next level, but it does tell you all you need to know when you look at the AFC West and realize, you know, three of the other 3 coaches outside of Antonio Pierce are all the highest paid coaches in the league. Andy Reid, Sean Payton, and Jim Harbaugh. It does tell you all you need to know. And, you know, again, that's Antonio Pierce is going to have to work his way up to that. And maybe, who knows, maybe the Raiders are going to have to spend some money to get a coach in that conversation. Again, that $16 million, Jim Harbaugh, he wanted that John Gruden deal, like that 10-year, $100 million that Gruden was reported to be under until he had to resign. That's what Jim Harbaugh apparently, at least reported, wanted from the Raiders if he was going to be the Raiders head coach. And I don't think that Mark Davis is going to sign anyone to a deal like that after what happened with John Gruden. But thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Raider Murphy from the 515. He's calling to talk about a few items that he just needs to get off his chest. Here he is, Raider Murphy from the 515.
Hey, yo, Q, how you doing? It's your boy, Raider Murph from Des Moines, Iowa, the 515. All right, check this out. I got a few things I got to get off my chest. As far as the game goes, can we just call out the fact that JPJ was killing it at center? Not to mention, this is a man who went from tackle and somehow found his way at center. And he's doing a great job. That mistake was just that, a mistake, something they can work on and get better. Now, Raiders have a better line. So, not to mention, like, as far as the offenses go, the identity of the offense was supposed to be a 12-man. Now we have Big Mike back on the scene. We can go back to that 12-man. You got 2 dope tight ends, amazing receiving core. Running back has some issues, but AOC is the guy who can make those passes. So, last part, it's kind of funny though, in my opinion. Has anyone ever talked about the fact that AP is the guy who ruined Tom Brady's perfect season? Like, their relationship in the NFL is kind of crazy. So, on top of the fact that AP replaced Tom Brady's former QB coach and offensive coordinator, and AP was the captain of the defense that ruined that Super Bowl, kind of going back and forth. I know I'm kind of flip-flopping. But when you have the ability to inspire a group of men like that, you simply don't throw that away. AP is the heart. Now, you got Patrick Graham in the defensive coordinator position. You got Junior and Papa Turner in the OC. I say you let those guys be the head and let AP be the heart. But anyways, love the show. First-time caller, long-time listener. And I hope I hear this on the show. If not, all good. Hey, Raider Murph out. Raider Nation for life.
Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, JPJ, really good center, right? I mean, obviously he was a dominating center there at Oregon, started out at the left guard position with the Raiders and transitioned to center, and I'm sure he'll never get that spot back. I'm sure he'll be, as long as he's in the league playing for the Raiders, I'm sure he'll be their center because he's just that much better at that position. Obviously, Brock and Big Mike, really good tight ends. Would like to see Big Mike getting more involved offensively outside of just blocking, but I think that'll just come with time as he's getting acclimated to Scott Turner's system and, just getting his legs back under and out after being out for personal reasons for so long. Antonio Pierce is definitely a leader of men. It's going to be interesting to see what the powers to be think about the body of work that he's put in this year as a full-time starter, or a full-time head coach, I should say. Is it going to be enough to warrant another year? Only time will tell, right? I mean, I've been very adamant about consistency, and I'm not writing off AP right now. But as I mentioned earlier, I don't think 2-15 is going to bring him back in 2025. So he's going to have to do something. He's got to win some games and show something, as far as I'm concerned, to make sure that he comes back in year number 2 as the head coach of the Raiders. But again, all that stuff, just like the draft pick, will all work itself out in the wash sooner rather than later. Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. It's good to hear from you. Hopefully you don't make that your last call, my man. Like I said, it's definitely good to hear from you. And got one more text. This one's from Mr. Crisp. It says, good morning, sir. This is Theo from Sacramento. I never want to see anyone lose their job, but what has AP done this season to make you want to bring him back next season? His things was resume on the grass, but his resume this year isn't all that great. We have the biggest coaching staff in the league, and it seems to be one of the worst. As far as Aiden O'Connell, I keep hearing how well he played on Friday. If he was any good, he wouldn't have been beaten out by Minshew at the beginning of the season. I've been a Raider fan my whole life, but I'm old enough, 52, to go with what I see and not what my heart says. That's Mr. Crisp, Theo from Sacramento with the text. Thanks so much. And look, I mean, I've said what I've said about Antonio Pierce from day one. Leader of men. Got these guys motivated. These guys are fighting, scratching, clawing every game. It's not like they mailed it in, packed it in. They're ready for Cancun, right? But again, it's a production-based business. Those are his words, not mine. So, as far as I'm concerned, he's got to win some games to stick around. The continuity is something that the Raiders need to have at some point. They just have had a revolving door at the head coaching spot. I don't think that's a good recipe, but I also don't think you just, keep a guy around just for the sake of keeping him around. You've got to have a reason to. There were some things that he tried to do, like hire Cliff Kingsbury, try to get up to number 2 to go get Jaden Daniels. Those things didn't work. I think those were obviously winning moves. Cliff Kingsbury didn't sign with them. They ended up with Luke Getsy. That was a losing move. Luke Getsy's not a very good offensive coordinator. Scott Turner's been much better, so I like what I've seen from Scott Turner. As far as Aiden O'Connell, I'm under the belief that you need to get a franchise quarterback. I'm under the belief that, Shedeur Sanders would be fantastic. If you don't get Shedeur, I think Cam Ward would be a really good quarterback as well. But I'm also under the belief and willing to see what Aiden O'Connell can do the rest of the way, especially under Scott Turner, right? I mean, again, just like you talk about the head coaches in the division, you also got to look at the quarterbacks in the division. I like what Aiden O'Connell brings to the table. Maybe he's a guy that can hold the fort down while a rookie sits behind him. Maybe even a whole year next year. I don't know. I don't know what the plan is, but obviously Aiden O'Connell's got something. I'm very confident that he could win games. I don't know what he can do consistently, and that's what it's going to be his job to prove the rest of the way. And I'll say this, for anyone who thought that maybe Aiden O'Connell should have started the season as opposed to Gardner Minshew, I don't think anybody was winning with Luke Getsy as their offensive coordinator. He just was not very good at what he did. And so Minshew went out there for one reason or the other. I'm sure a lot of that had to do with finances because nobody separated themselves in training camp. Nobody was good from Minshew or O'Connell. I mean, I was there to witness it myself, so I saw that. And so when you look at money, obviously money plays a role in the National Football League. It is a business, as we know. So thanks so much for that text. Definitely appreciate you. And that's going to do it for today's show. Have more calls and texts coming up tomorrow. We'll have plenty more conversation around the silver and black before we officially turn the page and start to look to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.